The last few videos were just things that I put up that I was going through and found interesting, so I wanted to share it. And it was kind of haphazard, I guess. The last video, the one called "The Black Man in Leicester is Always a Weakling," an old article was written by a black person, the late 1800s, about how this contrasts with Arab literature, and I was showing how Arab literature didn't so-called black people as weaklings. Even though a lot of people that we would consider black, they didn't consider black. But in that video, you might as well just read the descriptions, because everything in the video is in the descriptions box. And as someone pointed out, the video is hard to read. I was talking with a friend over YouTube, and he's been to Egypt and everything. And I was asking him about Egyptian relations with people on the Niger River. He said that he's skeptical of the idea of these migrations being because of invaders. And he was telling me some things, and he said that a lot of researchers want to believe that Africans stayed in one place until more powerful people came and uprooted them. But he says that studying African history, these migrations are usually more fluid, and their lifestyle and everything, it makes sense that these migrations were continual. These civilizations go back thousands of years, but I'm interested in the Middle Ages because a lot of it's neglected, in that it's not like Egypt totally lost contact with the rest of Africa in the Middle Ages. It wasn't cut off at all. And Tomboktu the Mysterious by Felix Du Bois, he discusses links between the Nile and the Niger. And you have to be careful about the things he says, because a lot of things are almost kind of have some racist ideas. He's not really, I wouldn't call him racist, but it's not like the civilization comes from Egypt. But what he says about there being contacts, that needs to be looked into. And the idea of an exodus, like I said before, is probably just a myth. Medieval writers, outsiders, do write a lot about ideas about Africans having contact and trading in places clear across the continent. And although those were probably exaggerations, there probably is truth in it. So that needs to be looked into more. And Egypt seems to be part of that trade network. It's almost like a conspiracy of these, people, and trying to keep control of monopolies in trade. Ibn Battuta, an African, and others in Morocco and other places are so ignorant of the geography of the African so-called interior. And I point that out a little bit in my video, Myth of so-called Arab Berber racism against blacks in the Middle Ages. And I want to point out, there's a book written in 1991 about African history to 1870 by Elizabeth Allo Eseke. Remember the quote I saw about the Zafoon from the book Medieval West Africa, Views from Arab Scholars and Merchants? She points out the same passage. She says, "A mysterious passage tells of the visit of a black king from the Eds state of Zafoon to the Almoravid capital of Marrakech. He rode his horse into the palace. The commander of the Muslims met him on foot, whereas the king of Zafoon did not dismount for him. He was tall, of deep black complexion, and veiled." And the same page also talks about how the Almoravids and their wars required the support of black Muslims. It says that on the same page. And I think this shows strong evidence that racism, as we know it today, didn't exist in this, at least in this part of the world. He gives examples of people being, various people being described as black.
the University of Tomboktu was having relationship with Toledo in Grenada, in Andalusia, Spain, with Kairouan in Tunisia, the University of Al-Azhar in Egypt, and other universities in Saudi Arabia, Zaria in Nigeria, and Kano.
Edward Matenga, director of the Great Zimbabwe Site. Dr. Innocent Pikarai speculates further.
I would like to think there could have been trade between the Congo and the Great Zimbabwe. It could have been indirect because we do not know much of what happened between the Congo and the Lubalunda in southeastern parts of Sahara, and between the Lubalunda and the copper producers of central Zambia. So these commercial contacts did take place either indirect or directly.
The Kanyok live today in the middle of the Democratic Republic of Congo and in the center of the continent, in an area where the trade networks of the Congo and Zimbabwe could well have overlapped. They sing a song exalting travel. Like the Bakongo and their neighbors, the Luba, the Kanyok were skilled in metalwork, both of a functional and decorative kind. The throwing knives of this region incorporate both features: sharp, three-bladed, highly decorated. They stand as potent symbols of power and skill, speaking across the centuries. Nigerian potter Lawson Oyekan conveys something of their beauty as he gazes at a collection of throwing knives at the British Museum in London.
Well, I find these pieces quite the stuff of dreams, even though they are intended to be things that will cause injury. I love them very much as beautiful things, not as dangerous things. I would be very proud to have achieved the level of understanding of this level of abstraction and craftsmanship.